Hey everyone, welcome in to another daily editorial here on the KE Report. I'm getting another update from Graphene Manufacturing Group, and this time we're going to be focusing on the THERMAL-XR division and the graphene lubricants. I know a lot of you are following along with this story because I keep getting a lot of questions, and it was just last week that I had Craig Nicol, the founder and CEO of the company, on to talk more battery focused. Be sure to check out that interview if you tended to miss it to get some of your battery questions updated. Now it's time for THERMAL-XR and graphene lubricant update. Graphene Manufacturing Group traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol GMG and on the OTCQX under the symbol GMGMF. Now, Craig, recently the company just released news August 19th that provided an update on the THERMAL-XR division. One aspect of that update is this resubmission for EPA approval in the US, as well as some testing updates. Let's start off with this resubmission. Now going through a pre-manufacture notice, a PMN, to submit to the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, for approval to use THERMAL-XR in the US. This sounds like a lot bigger process, what you're going through to get approval. Take us through what this PMN is all about, please.
Thanks, Corey. Great to be back on with you. Yeah, it's a very detailed process to get an EPA approval, and it is something to behold. As you would know, we already have approvals in Australia, Canada, Mexico. We can go into China, Singapore, and Europe. We went for the original submission to the EPA approval was late last year, and we kind of got told earlier this year that whilst the graphene coating had been approved previously under an LVE, they no longer want to do LVEs. They no longer want to do low volume exemptions, which was a 10-ton approval we sought just for HVAC, just for spraying. And so they really wanted to do a full PMN so they can condition it better. We don't really know why. I guess maybe they felt like the LVE was not working for them in that kind of approval process for graphene coating. So now we've had to really understand the full PMN process, all the data used. We've already put together all the data for that, and it's for every different way the coating can possibly be used that we understand right now, then all the different sectors it can possibly be used as well, not just HVAC. So there are many sectors that this coating can be used for, and we see that with our engagement in various different areas and sectors around the world. So this PMN, now we've signed our contract with the consultants, a very well-known consultant who's got a graphene PMN approval before. They're very confident that we can get through this. Whilst they've said it is a 12-month process, they are aware, the EPA is aware that we did put our application in and it was necessarily not accepted up front, not necessarily just because we didn't put the right application in. It was actually because they effectively changed their mind in this space. So they are kind of waiting to see the EPA approval application come through. Then there is the ability to not necessarily fast track it, but kind of put it on a more accelerated outcome where, because they've seen it as an environmental improvement type product, it's actually going to help the environment. So they're going to try to put that through. If they see it this way and judge that way internally, then they can put that through a much faster process. Right now, we're kind of holding the line that, it'll be a 12-month approval timeline once it's submitted. We aim to have it submitted by the end of October. We've pretty much got all the data ready, and it's an enormous amount of data. This is not small. But what we need to do is just make sure all of the documents are where they need to be, and then we can submit it, and then hopefully get it up and ready and approved by the end of which will be obviously October next year. In the meantime, we're still able to ship product to under R&D purposes, and we can actually charge for that as well, but that is still ongoing with a number of different opportunities for this product in America, and obviously, of course, in other parts of the world as well.
So with this wider scope that you're going through to get approval from the EPA, any other issues that we should be aware of? Is it more difficult to get this sort of approval? What's the lay of the land when it comes to potential risks here?
Yeah, the risks are really around what is the highest risk they see with the coding. And so it's substantially based on the potential for this to have health effects or environmental effects that are judged to be unacceptable. And that is then based on generally the highest application risk. And that I've seen is the spraying method. And so we've also got dipping. We've developed a new way of coding, which is called a flow coding method. And then also there are other ways of coding as well, which not very used much, but those are the main three. Out of those, it's the spraying that they're most focused on, I think, from what we understand. And we've got really good understanding about how the spraying works and the risks. Obviously, we always have make sure that from our point of view, we have people follow the procedures around making sure that they're fully masked up, and like anyone who does any spraying, that they should be using the right PPE for eyes and ears and of course your nose and mouth, and full cover overalls. Now that is what we do anyways. That's what we do around the world. That's what the documentation we've had for Australian coding. There's no necessarily any higher risk for the graphene coding because the graphene is fully immersed, and we have electron microscope images of the graphene fully immersed in the coating. So it's really around understanding that. So it's not necessarily around, is this a higher risk than any other coating? The coating mist is not at nanomaterial level, it's a micron particle. There's no nanoparticles coming out. They're microparticles, and that's basically the coating being misted to be able to apply to the application. The other thing is there's no real big plume when you apply to a condenser coil, because the condenser coil kind of takes the plume away. So there's even less risk there in our view that that this is a real problem in terms of creating a big plume and creating a health issue. All of these things have been reviewed by other countries as well. This is not new, and we have all of that basically, in our mind, mitigated and controlled to the lowest risk possible. So that's all the documentation that we need to submit, basically showing that this is a coating, not graphene powder. It's a coating where the graphene is fully immersed and there's no way for the graphene to come out. Then, they need to then go through and do their risk review process on that. And they have their own view of what graphene is and how it is a risk for health and environment. And graphene is generally not seen as toxic. It's generally not seen as an environmental risk. It is carbon itself, but a lot of it is around making sure that people understand their product, because it is a coating, it's an epoxy acrylic coating, not a graphene nanopowder. So that's really important to communicate that and show how the risks are being managed throughout the value chain, how it's taken from our warehouse all the way through and then brought to the different parts of the value chain and then actually coded in the end is also well documented. So we're pretty confident that we're going to get there. We understand what they're after. We've got very good consultants who've been through this before. They get what we do. So yes, it is a matter of going through the process in our eyes and making sure that we tick all the boxes in the right way.
Okay, let's move on then to the product testing, which sounds like it's actually advanced now to more manufacturing testing. The news release in the bottom half talks about some of the different areas that this testing occurred in: truck and train manufacturers, aftermarket air conditioning, data centers, industrial facilities such as LNG plants. There's a lot of potential uses for this product. What's the importance of this step now, moving past simply product testing into more manufacturing testing?
Yeah, and it's maybe hard for people to really understand unless you've actually been in these conversations. When you're making these parts in factories around the world, they've got a solution and they've had that solution for some time, and then we have this coating and it can take heat out, and that's something that these companies are really eager to do because they can have more efficient, more high performing products. And then they need to actually work out how that coating is then applied in the factory. Or do they get a third party to do that? Or do they go and buy equipment for that? Or do they adapt existing equipment? So that's kind of the next phase. And It is quite exciting. It is really something that you can kind of see how people are seeing that this is really a coating that I can put on some pretty high performing equipment to make it even better. And it shows the continuation of our work into what I'm calling the last mile of being able to show how this product can be used in so many different applications. We even have personal electronic products being tested for taking the heat out of personal electronic products. But in that case, they want to see it in a really nice kind of cosmetic application where the customer can actually use it with how it feels and touches and scratches. And so we're also being pushed into kind of a beyond the industrial outcome into a kind of cosmetic outcome as well, which is obviously, once we do that, there are many applications in that space. And these are really quite transformative deals for the company once we get there. So we've had to kind of go from, well, this is what the product can do, to, okay, well, this is how the product can work in your factory. And that's been quite an interesting shift internally. We're working, scientists, engineers are working on that kind of daily, and we have different meeting structures to be able to account for that, because we're previously just trying to get a product proved. Now it's trying to show, oh, this is how your factory can work with it. So I think whilst we had set out a beachfront for HVAC, that's firmly ensconced with various different industry awards, with various different distributors, various different jobs we've won, and performance testing we've done. Now we're really broadening out to other parts, and it's happening quite fast, to the point that there's probably a new large company coming to us weekly on how to use our product for their, our different type of sectors. And that's really creating this other view that we're really broadening out the opportunity to quite a number of sectors. I think we've internally said there's about 70 sectors. That's how many are possible. I think we're working probably internally on most of them. So we're not able to update every one of them because it'll look really a long list of potentials. So the breadth of this is far more than we'd ever thought. And some of these deals that we could get from them are really quite large than we ever thought possible under even HVAC. So it is different. It has grown. The opportunity is, the economics for us to make the coating and ship it and get it coated on other people's products in their factories is definitely there. The value's there. The recognition, the testing process is there. We're now working through a number of very large companies that can really become a real beacon, I guess, for our product profitability that we're obviously pushing for as early as we can.
So I assume this will be hard to answer, but is there a time frame on this manufacturing testing, or is it more waiting for that EPA approval to be able to make some of these potentially larger sales?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of these that aren't linked to the EPA approval. A lot of these testing cases are in Asia and Europe, so we can export no problem importing to. So really the American testing or approval is kind of more linked to kind of HVAC sales through the new Calgon country distribution in America. But yeah, these opportunities for manufacturing are much broader than just the EPA approval.
So talk to us about these other areas, because it is mentioned in that news release too that you're even working with China air conditioner manufacturers as well as other global markets. So when do you need to actually start focusing on certain markets to generate some significant revenue?
Yeah, and we're obviously still working with a large number of HVAC contractors and doing work for them as well, supplying them product. So that's still ongoing. But the more data we have and the more wins we have in that sector broadens our ability to talk to manufacturers, because the more knowledge we have about how this works. And what's difficult is when you go to a HVAC manufacturer, you've really got to try to understand their product almost as much or potentially even more than what they know, so that you can actually help them with this coating. And so when you start to talk about this really advanced HVAC air conditioning testing that we're now doing, your knowledge around thermodynamics and how the equipment works and what will show THERMAL-XR as a really advanced helpful product versus what won't, you really need to understand all of that. And so those conversations are quite intense about how to communicate the learnings and then how to get learnings from what they're doing to understand the product more. And that's literally what we're doing on a daily basis. And these deals The ideal opportunities are quite large. They're talking about really large factories with an enormous number of air conditioning systems that would need to be coated every day, obviously with kind of a dipping method, not just spraying.
So, Craig, you even said that while you're going through this testing, you can generate some revenue from these testing partners in the US, but also globally, you can sell this product. So, are you still expecting to turn a profit next year, even though that EPA approval might move into later next year?
Yeah, I think the EPA approval has really kind of pushed out some really solid expected revenue, and that's not easy to swallow in our kind of face that, what we're trying to do is build significant revenue, obviously with where we are. And we obviously have other income which, we're focused on as well, which is our battery joint development revenue. And then we have a significant amount of R&D cash coming back. And we did a press release that aimed to take about $4.5 million out of the cost of the business on an annual basis. And we'll come out shortly on that. And I think right now that looks like it's probably going to get there, but we've got to obviously got to keep pushing through that. So in total, when you put all that perspective together, it's going to be difficult to be able to just manage ourselves into a positive cash flow next year. However, there are work that we're doing right now which could very easily make that happen. Any one of these opportunities that we're working through could easily make that happen. So it's a bit like, how do you prepare for these deals with basically some of the biggest companies in the world, manufacturers, and then prepare that for your kind of outlook when you haven't had one drop yet. We do feel like it's a bit calm before the storm, or a bit of a precipice that we're working through. And then with these opportunities are very large, and we're the only ones who really do it. So the case is to us to show how it all works for them and for us is there. And that's what we like to do. We like to be in that situation, and that's where we are. So we'll just keep pushing through it. So I'm not saying that, there's no way we can get there, but certainly with the EPA, the way it's turned out, hasn't made it very easy to get to our goal of being cash flow positive next year. So you think, well, in total, we've got to say that, the EPA has made that, quite difficult.
One other question that came in regarding this THERMAL-XR was asking about any test results from long-term durability of this product when coated on any product. Can you share any updates on that, the long-term durability of THERMAL-XR?
Yeah, so we have testing going on in American labs right now, and it's been going for over 11,000 hours with no issue. So 11,000 hours with salt sea spray I think it's a 25% salt. So this is a highly corrosive environment, and there's been no issue after 11,000 hours, which is very, very long time. It's one of the longest test results of any coating of any around the world. So yeah, I think we can safely say that the coating holds its own, does what it needs to do for longevity. The graphene's certainly not going anywhere. That's got 5,000 years of half-life. So that's how they're able to carbon date things. So it's really around the coating, and with the graphene, it's very, very strong and long lasting as well.
All right, Craig, that takes us through all the THERMAL-XR questions. Let's quickly get into some of the G lubricants. When it comes to fuel savings testing, it was previously reported that you were working through additional tests, needed to collect more data for certain reviewers to sign off. Any updates on these tests?
Yeah, we've basically gone and re-engineered our whole testing equipment, and we've just bring all that together to actually pull it together in the last week. So, quite excited about that. It's a huge opportunity for us. We know we have got some pretty big opportunities in sales we're working through, but we need more data. There's two broad areas where this is playing out. One is obviously in diesel engines, which it's quite clear from our point of view that we can show good energy savings with our concentrate, but also in kind of compressors in air conditioners, we've got pretty good data to show that it can reduce energy consumption with the smallest amount of our graphene lubricant additive as well. And so we're talking to both types of companies, both very large opportunities there, and that data is going to be critical, but in the end, these guys always will need to do their own testing, and so that obviously takes time. And being a former diesel fuel engineer myself in Shell many years ago, you've really got to make sure this data is correct. Otherwise, you can lose your credibility. And it's very difficult to make this kind of fuel testing data spot on. So whilst we've had further customers that we've worked with show pretty good energy savings or fuel savings, we want to make sure that any data that we come out with is really solidly tested on multiple different ways and with university or third party sign off, and that's what we aim to do, and that's what we're still working on.
All right, Craig, thank you very much for addressing these questions, and thank you everyone for continuing to email me all your questions. Keep them coming, and I will keep following up with Craig to get everything answered and follow up with any more progress that we see in the THERMAL-XR division, the battery division, or in the G lubricant division. Craig, thank you again for your time. I appreciate the update.
Thanks, Corey.